start off by talking about some initial suggestions for starting out with note investors. And a little bit background, I started note investing in 2017 and got my education through Scott, primarily through Scott. And one of the biggest suggestions that I had was when we started out was listening to a lot of the information he provides. Basically, at the time, his podcast, which he would run it daily. And one of the things that I would do is working full time, I'd commute back and forth to work. So one of the things I did is grabbed a little dictaphone. And with that, I think we got a little feedback here. With that, I would hear things and just make comments and really just record them, to write them down, to follow up on things, and gave a lot of great ideas. One of the comments I remember one time around Christmas time was Scott was thanking a lot of the people who he was in business with, including a lot of people he had bought from. Yeah. And I was still someone new to notes, and all of a sudden Scott rattled off, 5 or 6 people who sold notes, which are, a lot of low hanging fruit, the Paul Burkett's, the Dave Polios, but as someone starting out, it's where we all started. So that was kind of one of the top suggestions that I had. Gail, what about yourself?
Well, I started studying about performing notes, actually. I took some classes, one of them with Jeff Armstrong, and was really impressed, but it didn't offer enough, excitement for me. I mean, I still like performing notes and everything, but I decided to jump into the non-performing world and joined a meetup group here in Central Florida. And there was 6 people in the meetup group. 2 of them were new like me to non-performers, and 2 of them were doing things, and 2 of them just had the deer in the headlights look. They wanted to do something but weren't quite sure. The ones that were doing things were Scott Carson's students. So I decided to go ahead and call, and I called Scott's number thinking I'd get a hold of somebody other than Scott, and that just blew me away. He answered his own phone. He said, well, of course I answer my own phone. But he's so down to earth and seems to be very caring about the success of us and his students that it just resonated with me. So I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump on this full bore. And I did. And I've got 8 notes now. So it's something must be working.
So question for you. Did you start out JVing with someone, or did you buy a note on your own? And was it a performer or non-performer? I'm curious.
The only ones I bought are non-performing first mortgages. I haven't done any of the certificate or CFDs yet, contract for deeds. I've just done notes. And I decided to JV on the first 2 because you can, I just thought it would be a good way to start. And it has been.
Because there's a lot of back and forth I know out there, whether you should JV with someone on your first deal, buy your first note. I actually bought my own. I didn't JV on mine. And, I started out buying a few. And when I started, I actually bought, one of the ones I bought was a performer, because I think buying a performing note or non-performing, the process is still very similar in many instances. So for people who are out there who are probably not considering JVing and want to try and do it on their own, which depends, it's a personal preference and also based on experience. It's not a one size fits all. But I would recommend for people performing definitely gives you a lot of the insight in regards to learning the contact site if you're using Madison and the boarding process and a lot of those things about getting the assignments recorded and stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it, and that's an excellent perspective. One I actually didn't take into consideration. I guess being a former rehabber, living on the edge all the time, and you do. I like the analysis and determining whether something was a good deal or not. So you have a good insight on that and a good perspective on how to look at both sides, and it's a good consideration.
Yeah. What are a few of the other things for people starting out? What other suggestions do you have for newer investors in this note space?
The best thing I can say is you do get to a point of educating yourself, and I think we've all talked about educating ourselves and make sure that we get a good solid education. It's just like college. When we went to college and real estate school, all these different things you learn and you get the education, and then as soon as you walk out the door, it's kind of like, now what? that's when I found the benefit of mentoring and networking, and having the safety net of everybody that's in the mastermind, because we all care and we help along the way. So what about you with becoming someone coming out of the box for the first time?
Yeah, so a few things. I think kind of the tail on what you said, the analysis by paralysis is something that I went through as an engineer. You overanalyze everything to the nth degree, and until you jump in, that's a big big learning curve. I think it was Scott or somebody hit the nail on the head when they said, buying a note's like golfing. You can watch all of the instructional videos in the world about how to golf, but until you step up to the tee and swing that club and hit it, it's really a completely different animal. It's a different feel. So that's one component to it. And the other thing is, the majority of people in this space are very friendly and out to help you.
Yes.
Like Scott, like he'll tell you at Fast Track, pick up the phone, and if you need him, call him, and he'll, majority of times he does answer. And I was surprised at that as well, because of how busy he is and what his schedules is like. He still makes time to talk to a lot of people who he's involved with. And I think the majority of people in this business are like that. They're very helpful. And I would tell people to communicate and, learn from, things like on the Facebook group, that Scott has and stuff, where, people can ask questions and learn about things. But this business, it's like most businesses, the more you network, the better off I think you'll be.
Right. And one thing I have, when I've talked to folks about getting into the note business, is a lot of them, just a minute. Sorry, I dropped my phone. A lot of folks will get as much free training online as they can. Okay, they'll go ahead and commit to getting the free training, listening to the podcast. That'll only get you so far. It'll give you the 40,000-foot view of what the note business is about. But when you get down to it, there's so many moving parts, and we've talked about that. How many moving parts are in a note transaction, and the different ways it can go, or it can just make a complete left turn on you if you're not careful. So having that additional safety net is really very important. We can't operate in a vacuum.
And, it's all about speed, something you're very familiar with, which from your background at NASA, you can learn it on your own, and it's just going to take a very long time. And the more education you get, the more you advance. I started out with the virtual note buying workshop, which I thought was a very good primer in regards to understanding how to bid, understanding a lot of the nuances and logistics, to really, get your feet wet and get, start your foundation. And then Note Camp really introduces you to a lot of the players in the industry, along with a lot of other tools and software. And, that's where I really had most of my education. And that's when I started really buying notes and constantly buying notes. And, then when I took, and I mentioned this on the podcast I was on last week or a few weeks ago, about the Fast Track, which I know you're excited that you're going to be taking soon.
Yes.
Is, and the name basically hits the nail on the head, where it really can expedite things. And, again, Fast Track, where you're going as a newbie, and it really is all dependent on your level of education you want to learn and how you want to go about it. It's personal preference for everybody on things, but starting out kind of, there's a lot of free education out there, but I think it's, some things you also want to get a paid education, because I think the return on your investment can be very, very high return based on the education that you get.
You're absolutely right on that. But as an engineer, you also know that you learn more from what goes wrong than what goes right. And one of the things that I don't want to learn from going wrong is my family's financial future and my financial future and my reputation. Because folks may inadvertently, as new people, do things that may not be quite copacetic in this industry, and you want to learn the protocol, and you want to learn the language, and you want to learn the context, most of all, on how to approach the business.
Yeah. And what's sad is sometimes you'll have people who will, I'll say, be kind of, I don't want to use the term bad apple, but they will misrepresent the rest of us as note investors,
Yeah,
where
but
they
that
do
happens in any
things.
industry. That happens in,
It,
yeah.
it does. And with this industry being such a small, tight knit industry, but the reality of it is real estate in general is very small and tight knit.
Yes.
I work full time for a developer in DC, and I still see the same players all around, whether they're with company A or company B. So, every business you're in, it truly is a small world. So it's, as a new investor, just be thoughtful of what you're doing. If you have a question about something, feel free to ask other people, hey, is this kosher? Should we be doing this? To get people's opinions, because like I said, the last thing you want to do is ruin your reputation and do it accidentally because it's just something you didn't know.
Right. So you're juggling two jobs. We did a podcast a little while ago about the work-life balance. You and I both have little ones at home. We talked about that. Well, I only have one little one, but she's a handful, a great handful, don't get me wrong. But finding that work-life balance is very important to me, and I'm sure it is to you also. But what do you do in a typical day as a note investor? Nobody's really talked about what goes on behind the scenes, behind the computer.
Yeah. So, especially for those with the full-time job, it's really focusing and, time blocking your schedule.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things too that I'll mention, and, I'll ask you this question, is setting expectations, because it's not as much the note side of things, it's the business side of things. And where I struggled is really planning out the roadmap for, building a calculator, for example. That takes, how long did it take you to build your calculator?
I've actually taken a couple of different ones. I've looked at some that are like, even with advanced degrees, I don't know what the heck, how to read it. But, I look at the basic things, because you're right. You can get into that. Is this a good idea? Is this, a good note? Is this, my calculator is probably two together, and it serves its purpose. The main things I want to find out are the returns, ROIs, and the 3 exit strategies. So how about you?
So I probably spent a month on mine, and I overanalyzed and killed it. Put too much in it probably, and part of the reason why is talk about work-life balance. Also in the process of getting a master's in real estate finance right now. So I took a finance class, and I posted on the We Close Notes one of the textbooks I had from a finance class. That really is kind of what I shaped and built my calculator on. But, I spent too much time on it, honestly, because I was focusing too much in my business and versus on. And when you realize that, hey, I spent 2 weeks on it, that's 2 weeks that you're not doing something else. And then when you go to do a video for, I'd ask Eric Hyde this question. He posts a lot of videos. Usually when you start out, your first take isn't what you record. You probably spend a half hour recording a video. And then you got to remember, you only have probably, 1 to 3 hours a day in notes. So it's really focusing and trying to work on things. But the time it takes to record a 5-minute video may take you a half hour. And you really got to manage that time and put that into perspective to leave enough time for yourself, and set your expectation that after a weekend seminar, you know how to buy a note, and you could go buy a note, but to scale your business, it will take time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Well, I've seen both yours and Eric's, and Eric Hyde and Cody Cox's videos. And I personally think that we should have an Academy Award for video on notes, because you guys are like the masters. And it looks like, you make it so easy, and I've gotten a little bit better on it, but I also do mine and then post them afterward. I can't bring myself to do a Facebook Live. Like, this has been what Scott's
You're doing it now.
Yeah, I know. So it's sort of like what Scott did to us is kind of like, don't tell me they're going down the sidewalk outside my house. Okay, what Scott did was he's given us an opportunity to get outside our comfort zone, which I believe we have. And, doing these podcasts have really increased my comfort level a lot. I don't know about you.
It has. And the other thing too with videos, give you a little hint, I bought the software called Camtasia, Camtasia. And what it allows is when you record, it's real easy to like snip and cut things out. So if you are mumbling, bumbling, and stumbling, or you screw something up and you got halfway through it, but you like the first half of it, you can cut and then merge videos. You can add music to it. Something that I found through somebody who does marketing to Infusionsoft kind of sent me direction to it. And since I've started using that, I found making videos a hell of a lot easier, because it saves time, because I'd record, call it a 5 or 7 minute case study, and then you get to like the end of the case study and you blow it at the end, or you fumble something. It's like, I don't want to record this whole thing again. I keep the first 6 minutes of it and then record it, and then can intertwine it, and it interloops without the hesitation or without kind of cutting the line through it. So I found that to be extremely helpful. Putting that investment in.
I think Camtasia would probably come in handy with the noise that's going outside my condo door. So I'm going to have to defer just a second. If you can talk, Chris, while I can get them to stop, because I know that it's bleeding through to everybody.
So another thing that kind of hits upon what's going on with Gail right now is, in a day in the life of a node investor, is you don't know what's coming down the pipeline. You may get an email from a servicer that is either good or bad news. Yesterday, I got an email from a servicer where I had a borrower who hasn't paid in 90 days, and they emailed to tell me that the borrower is paying it off, the entire loan. And I kind of just started shaking and scratching my head, like, what's going on? And the reason why is the borrower, through a divorce, ended up renting the house to the daughter and was having the daughter pay the mortgage. And the daughter essentially was sending the mortgage bills, but she was sending it to the prior servicer. She wasn't sending it to my servicing company. So when they realized that the last 3 payments had gone out and they just had gotten their tax return, and it was a low balance, it's under 10,000 left on the UPB, but they realized, you know what, why don't we just pay this thing off? So, that's was on the positive end, kind of a day in the life of some things that can occur. But other instances you may have occur where you have a borrower who's coming close to foreclosure and then sends in a RESPA Truth in Lending Act letter, basically saying that the servicer didn't comply with something, and then wants a response within so period of time, which may cancel your foreclosure, which I had that happen approximately a week ago.
Oh, did you? What state was that in?
Alabama. I should have listened to Scott and not bought a note in Alabama. But but it was one of the first 4 that I bought, which I touched upon earlier. A few other things, and Gail, chime in when the background noises come back, so I don't take up all the time. A few other things. Okay, a few other things just to comment on is, what's your focus on marketing, sourcing versus reviewing notes and due diligence? That really probably, once you get going, gets split probably 50-50, maybe even a little more towards the marketing side of things to start really marketing. And that really focuses on staying consistent. And once you get set up, like I got set up in Buffer, and I send out 2 posts a day. In the morning, I send out some inspirational quote, and then in the evening, I've been sending out a vlog, as Gail Greenberg says, a video blog with a link to my website and an article. Mm-hmm. And once you get set up and consistent with that, it you really get set in motion where I can do a week's worth of stuff and get everything timed on a weekend, which allows me during the week to focus on responding to emails, responding to the servicer. One concept that I'll let people know too in the day in the life is email. There's a stat out there that says people check their phone few hundred times a day. And what I've started focusing on is I check my email first thing in the morning. I'll wait probably 3-4 hours, check it at lunchtime, and then check it in the evening. I may glance at it, but typically those are 3 times I'll respond, because what happens a lot of time is you'll be working on something, then you're getting an email that throws you for a curveball, and everything you're involved in, you lose track of that to respond to the email, and to get caught back up, you'll spend 10 minutes trying to remember. And if you add each one of those 10 minutes up, it throughout the day, it adds up. So,
It definitely does, because I find that I can get caught up in emails too. So I check it only a couple of times a day too. If I can jump back to a second, when you said that you set everything up on the weekend, what system or software do you use to set everything up ahead of time?
Buffer is what I
Oh,
use. So Buffer I use, which posts to my Facebook page, my Facebook business page, Instagram, which you have to still do manually, Twitter, will also post to LinkedIn, because I work full time. I use my LinkedIn as my, I don't post the note stuff primarily to LinkedIn, but if I find interesting articles about construction, real estate development on the weekends, I'll write a quick post on that to post to LinkedIn on the business side of things as well. But that's been, the software I've used to get everything out into the social media world.
Beautiful. Yeah, it seems that systems and processes, I've been focusing a lot on that lately to streamline the business so I can scale it.
So Gail, you've got 8 notes that I know you're working on right now. Why don't you share a little bit about kind of the day in the life that you have?
Well, my day of my life usually ends up having somebody that's trying to blow off the passageway of my condo to stop while we're doing a podcast. Other than that, it starts out with, I broke it down into days of what I do. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I tend to focus on reaching out to banks, asset managers, and try to get tapes. I've done that. Friday ends up being catch up, and then Monday is generally, I do marketing every day. I try to market at least 30 minutes a day and carve out the time. I'm a little more negligent on doing the videos that I've been doing, but I try to do a Sunday noteworthy nugget. And sometimes the last couple of ones I've done have not been so much directed towards notes as it has about like Memorial Day. I did one on Memorial Day. That's kind of a significant holiday to me. But also, I spend a good deal of time analyzing, well, not a good deal of time, but I've had an opportunity to get some notes that have like 600 or 700 assets on them. And when I mention that to folks, they're like, my gosh, that's a lot of assets to look through. Well, yes, it is. So you have to come up with a way to go through those assets pretty quickly. And I'm only looking at owner occupied in the states that I focus on. And also, within a certain price point that I'm comfortable working on. Anything that comes in on to Florida usually catches my eye, obviously, because it's in my home state. And then I just send out the bids and wait for acceptance or counters.
Good. Now, you mentioned about your marketing and sending out emails or newsletters and stuff. How successful have you been in finding partnerships on some deals through your email marketing?
It's actually turned out pretty well. Some of the notes that I've purchased, I wanted to hold for myself to have some money going into the 401ks. The returns are not anything to write home about. They're definitely double digit, but they're under about 20%. I try to get over a 20%, 25% ROI. So I want to make sure that the notes are really solid before I, put them out to my network. And I have had quite a few people reach out to me about, hey, like your newsletter, I'm interested in JVing. And then it's a matter of going through and actually doing some due diligence on the JV partner, potential partner, because you do want to make sure it's a good fit. I've had to tell a couple of JV partners that they've wanted, things for like $10,000, which would put us into the CFD category. Then other ones that I just didn't feel would be, it's sort of like a short-term marriage, if you will, for anywhere from 6 to 16 months, where you want to make sure you can work together and you don't want to take their last of their money out of their savings account or 401k. So the long answer to your short question was, yeah, I've been pretty successful. How about you?
I have, and you hit upon 3 great points that you just spoke of. One is basically the answer, which is if you market, people will come as long as it's a good deal, which you made the second component, which is I do the same thing. Every offer I put in would be a deal that I would buy with my own portfolio. And so if I didn't have a partner, I would still buy that asset. So that's key component. I just don't buy things trying to hunt down a partner. It would be something I would buy and I would want to hold. I know Dan Zatofsky posts a lot about his criteria is, would he be willing to hold that property and rent it hold it as a rental, which I think is a great idea or concept, because it's one of those things where a lot of instances you may take back that property and, is that what you want in your portfolio? And then are the returns satisfactory to you to provide a return to the JV? And then the third thing you hit upon is, interviewing and your joint venture partner. It's, I think, critical to make sure that you get along with your joint venture partner and you're on the same page. Right. You don't want your partner thinking that the deal is going to be a quick cash for keys and get out, and he's going to make a quick 10, 12, 15% or 30%, whatever his expectations are in 3 to 6 months. You got to go in with the mindset and make sure they understand, hey, this is probably a 12 to 18 month process. If it goes sooner, great. And one of the things that I caution people on is if you market and show deals that are providing a 60% or 80% return, for me, I look at that and honestly, I don't believe the numbers, and I would be less inclined to actually reach back out to you, because it would make me feel like, there's something wrong somewhere with that deal. And secondly, I wouldn't, recommend to people advertising something with such a high returns anyways, because, that's the expectation that partner is going to set in their mind. I mean, if somebody sends you something, Gail, that says, hey, look, we're looking at, potentially 60% on this deal. What do you think the first number, what's the first number you're going to remember?
Yeah, exactly. And you're absolutely right about that, because, what do you do? You under promise and over perform. I've always been conservative on my numbers, and that also might be a little bit of a detriment to me, because I would rather have people happy at me than mad at me. So I tend to estimate costs, which may be cutting my own throat too at the same point. But you're absolutely right about making sure that there's a good fit with the people, and that you're able to have that relationship. I know some folks, my business model is based on trying to keep people in their house. I definitely,
Same here.
Yeah, a lot of us are. We're not looking for getting REOs, where we are the owner of the REO. I'm not looking for inventory for rehabs. I've talked to 1 or 2 people over time that are former rehabbers, and they were looking at this as a way to evict people, foreclose on people so that they can get rehab projects. To me, that's kind of cruel, but that's just me. I don't feel comfortable doing that, and I don't want to do that. I want to try to have a balanced transaction all the way around. And if it ends up that people have to leave their home, I can't imagine the difficulty that would be. But I try to give them a little bit of dignity and ability to go ahead and move on with their lives as intact as possible.
Which brings up a kind of a point, moving on a little bit. The next topic is, if I recall, you're a realtor and a rehabbed fix and flipper who's now a note investor. And one of the things that we talked about earlier that we want to talk about today is, when we talk about your network, a lot of people just think of, other note investors. And I think that's somewhat of a misconception, and really making sure that you spread the word out to other types of investors and how that can help other investors. And since you've been in the fix and flip business and you know how competitive that is right now, I'd like for you to, share some thoughts on regards to how note investors can help other, whether it's a realtor or wholesaler, fix and flipper, buy and hold investor. Why don't you share some thoughts on that?
Okay. One of the things, you and I think a lot alike, which I really love. And I love doing this podcast with you today because of that reason. One of the things that I found in my career with NASA was I was in some pretty intensive offices. I was in IT for a while, then I went into the environmental, and then I was in propellants and life support. The reason I'm telling you that is because I was a go-to person if somebody wanted to find somebody. Who do you think could do this, or what do you think about, where I need this taken care of. So it was either I knew the person, or I would tell them I know people who know people. So it's kind of like this, and I'm segueing into that for a reason. I'm very well connected. I'm very blessed with that. I am an EXP realty agent, EXPs all over the country. So if I need some expertise, or if I have to turn something over to someone, I'll call them and say, hey, look, I'm not going to list it. You get both sides. Go ahead. God bless you for doing that. And I give it to them. Now, that seems very generous, and it is. But then I'll tell them, I'm calling my investor buddies. I'm calling my wholesaler buddies. I'm going to put this out to my network, but I want you to work the deal, because it's very symbiotic what we do. If we have a unfortunate incident where we have to take back a property, okay, what are we going to do with it? Do we want to rehab it, or do we want to put it out to other people? Because we can provide inventory to wholesalers, we can provide inventory to rehabbers, and we can provide inventory or an opportunity for an end user, because it's a seller's market, has been for quite a while. Properties are going at like 90% of their list price right now. In some cases, almost 100% of the list price in certain areas of the United States. So there isn't very much inventory. So we can all help each other. There's enough business out there. As a former rehabber, a rehabber, I was finding that you might have 1 or 2 deals a week that comes up at the most, but you have 50 people bidding on them. Well, in the note business, I found that we all have different criteria. We all are looking at different things. We all are looking at different areas of the country. So the competition's not there, but the relationships and the desire to help each other succeed it's always there. So it's great with that. So we all help each other. We all can benefit from each of the different industries that we're in regarding real estate.
No, and you've hit some good points there. And I want to share just a quick story too about, I've got a lot of contacts on LinkedIn, and I'll reach out to people for, realtors, wholesalers, or investors, and they'll ask me, I'll connect with them, and they'll reply back, what is it you do? And I basically will tell them, hey, I'm a note investor. I buy first position non-performing notes with the attempt to keep the borrower in the house, but in some instances that we do have to take that property back. And they didn't even read that last sentence, and I sent basically be like, oh, you can't help me in any way, shape, or form. It's, the market right now is tight as it is where we are. We don't need note investors in our area. And, I took that and I, thought about it for a second. And part of me wanted to chuckle, because the reality of it is we don't compete with wholesalers or fix and flippers, but they definitely could or should network with us, because they're having trouble finding properties right now, or finding properties at a decent deal. And if we're buying these assets at, 35 to 55 cents on the dollar, if you get something that's a $60,000 property, say you're all in it for 40 even, they're still right now what people are paying, the old 70% rule, and you can attest to this. I think the 70% rule right now is thrown out the window in regards to that, and I think it's more closer to 80, 90, and people are looking for these deals and trying to wholesale them, and they're reaching out and they're spending all this money on mailers and letters and so forth. But I would think if a wholesale or fix and flipper joined a note group and said, hey, is anyone taking properties back in this area? I'll buy them for you, and either pay cash or even work out a deal with them where you hold the note for 6 months while they rehab it. It's powerful. I have somebody in North Carolina I work with now who had a note that was actually a contract for deed. We did cash for keys. Long story short is the BPO that was given to me by the realtor who actually went inside the property was off by about 60%. So we ended up selling it to an investor, and I'm holding a note for her, and she's in there and now fixing it up and so forth. And the property, which we were told was worth 50, was only worth 30. We sold it to her for 30, carried the note, and now she's rehabbed it. And now the property's worth about 65,000, and she's going to go refinance it in probably another 6 months. And she, when she refinance it, she's like, "Hey, can we do this again?" And I'm like, yeah, this is, great concept. If you can find someone like that, because, as a note investor, for me, the worst thing for me is when I have to take a property back and have to do that management of a vacant property, whether I'm trying to sell it or rehab it. That's not what I'm in this business to do. I will do it if I have to. It's pretty much what I do for my full-time job, and it's very time consuming. I'm more about trying to work that borrower and try and not take these properties back.
Yeah, you're right. And that's a good strategy. I'll go a step further. If it looks like there's a property that's going to be coming back into my my portfolio, I will go ahead and call folks and say, "Hey, it looks like I'm going to be taking this property back. Are you interested in a project?" So I put it on their radar right away. And then if it's available, I'll say, "Well, no, it ended up, we reversed course and we're able to keep them in," or whatever. But I try to do that reach out in the front end. And recently I had an REO, and I called a wholesaler and tried to wholesale to a wholesaler. Now, it was kind of funny. The guy had been a wholesaler for a very long time, and he was kind of surprised to get my phone call. But it was a matter of, he's like, "I never thought about doing it this way. How are you going to do that?" I said, "Well, there's enough meat on this bone for all of us, so I'm not going to be greedy on it. And if I get it to you, then you can do what you want with it." But sometimes you have to take that initiative, and joining a RIA, a local RIA, will give you access to wholesalers and rehabbers and buy and hold people and notes. So it's really good. It's a good strategy, and I think we can all benefit from each other, no doubt.
Yeah, and you, again, another note nugget you just threw out there again is don't be greedy.
Right.
On these deals, if you take it back in REO, and you can make a few bucks on it, or even if you can return something to your investor, I would do that 95 out of 100 times if it gets me out of the deal versus having to get it rehabbed, get it listed. And granted, you might make some extra money in the grand scheme of things by doing that process, but what's your time worth, and what's a missed opportunity because you're spending your time, figuring out, is your rehabber finishing it? And then you have to have someone check on your rehabber because it's most likely not in your area. So can you make money off of that? Absolutely. You can make money all day long, but what are you making less than the opportunity that you might have been able to pick up 3 more notes by selling that asset and make some money on some deals that could be really good deals versus trying to go by the, by the skin on another deal and shortchange it. So that's one thing that, definitely don't be greedy.
Right.
And that's what I've always kind of, one of my rules of thumb is, I'm not going to be greedy in this business because we all are in it to make money and so forth, but I have to evaluate it from a big picture of what's the time and what's the overall return, because you might make an extra $5,000 over 6 to 8 months, but if you got that money back to your partner in that time frame, could you have made that money somewhere else or even more? So that's something that you also have to evaluate and consider.
You're right. I was a project manager for NASA, and it sounded like overkill, but it worked out very good because I could turn a property from the time I closed on it until the next closing in about 6 weeks. And this is where it gets really kind of sketchy, because it looks on the outside like doing a rehab is pretty easy, but I've built a team in 3 counties, the 3 adjacent counties to where I live here, plus the county that I'm in, for folks with painters, roofers, flooring people, because I don't actually do the rehab myself, to go in there and get the job done. Well, if you don't have that type of support system, trying to go to a different area to try to build that and get reliable people and not know the permitting laws and everything else like that, it just piles on each other. So it's a lot easier just to go ahead and turn it over to a wholesaler or turn it over to a rehabber that works in that area than trying to oversee a project. Because believe me, before I got out of doing it full time, there was a lot of folks that hosed up rehab jobs. And then I would look at it and just out of curiosity go, I knew it was on the market, knew it was, rehabbed, and go back in and look at it in a couple months and go, man, this is really bad. So you have to really know what you're doing on both sides. And as much as and people think, why do you do that? Why did you like to do that? Because I like to find a dogged out house and bring it back to splendor. And Gail Greensberg asked me about that. She says, why? That's that nurturing part of you, the mother part of you that wants to take an ugly baby and turn it into something. No, it's something I've done my whole life, ever since I was like 10, and my dad and uncle were in real estate, and I'd clean their rentals and make them all nice. Because they had a saying, if something is clean and shiny, it's sellable and it's rentable. And that is so true, and that stuck with me. So I found that it's just better to have someone do it, stay laser focused on one aspect of real estate. And in our cases, you do construction, which is great and very admirable, especially in the area that you work in. I've traveled to DC quite a bit. To stay laser focused, because it's great to just throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. But if you develop the expertise and you become a subject matter expert on something, and in our cases we become subject matter experts on notes, it's great. It's a great way to go.
Nope, hit the nail on the head. So
thanks.
So with that, Gail, pretty much I think we've talked about our topics. Why don't we wrap up and have you talk about briefly where you're investing, what you got going on, and how people can reach out to you.
Okay, excellent. I'm Gail, the Note Gal at Noteworthy Investments, 321-417-1142. I am right now I am investing in Ohio and Indiana, North Carolina, Florida. I want to talk to you a little bit more about Alabama. My mother-in-law is in there, so we tried to look at some properties up there. Ohio, Indiana, North Carolina, South Carolina. Looking at first non-performing notes with the intent on getting people to be able to stay in their homes. And if not, well, c'est la vie. I'm also looking at CFDs, but I haven't bought a CFD yet. So www.gailthenotegal.com is my website, and you can see some of my inventory up there. And how about you?
So I can be reached email at chris@investments.com. And my website is www.investments.com. My investment area, I typically tell people I invest south of the Mason-Dixon and east of the Mississippi. I stay out in New York, New Jersey. I've had one note in Pennsylvania, which the foreclosure timeframe and costs there are a little lengthier than I want, so probably not going to do too much more there. I really like one state I really like is Maryland, and the reason why is it's a little more difficult to get into Maryland. I'm based in DC, so and I work full time in Maryland. I have a great team of attorneys, contacts, title companies here in Maryland. There's the debt buyer license concerns in Maryland, so I've had a lot of success in Maryland, and I'd say about 25% of my portfolios here in that state. But similar to you, North Carolina, I really like. Indiana, Michigan, good states as well. Florida, I've got a few notes. Ohio, I've got one, which has been a challenge that I'll share with people once Franco can record my deed in lieu on that one. That took 5 months to get. But wow. So yeah, I mean, it's really, and like a lot of people say, get a team in place, make sure you have an attorney, a realtor, and people in place when you invest in some of these areas, because they're going to be your best friends and be the guidance, because they're really the experts that you need to manage in this. So,
right. Excellent.
Well, Gail, it's been a pleasure today, and I believe also we are teed up for the 12th as well to have another host on the 12th as well.
Yes, I think that's a day that is the last of us hijacking Scott's podcast, and I think we get to close it up, and it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it, absolutely.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And everybody, thank you today for watching. And again, we look forward to hearing from you all. Any questions or comments about this show or anything in note investing at all, feel free to reach out to Gail and myself.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you all.
All right. Have a good day. Bye, everybody.
Bye.